Let me get this straight. There's an actual mirror that can help you see through time and consciousness? Let's get into this. Nikolai Kozyrev was a Russian astrophysicist in the early part of the 20th century. And he was fascinated by the stars. But you know what else he was fascinated by? All things woo, apparently. He was into figuring out what time was. Now, there had been many scientists who had been on this, Einstein being one of them. But instead of measuring moments, he argued that time was something tangible, something that actually had mass. And in order to prove this, he decided he was going to build mirrors, which has now become the famous Kozyrev mirrors. Now, what are these mirrors? This is where it gets into the woo. Not only can these mirrors, according to this theory, is that it can see through time and alter consciousness. Now, what did these mirrors look like, and how far did this go? And most of all, how successful was he? Well, let's check it out. Kozyrev mirrors were large curved sheets of highly reflective metal, typically made from aluminum or aluminium if you're British. The design was fairly simple but striking, resembling elongated metallic cylinders or semi-enclosed chambers. The mirrors were often curved inward, forming a shape akin to a crescent or partial tube, with enough space for a person to sit or lie inside. Now, according to Nikolai Kozyrev and his followers, his experiments were quite successful. And even though it hadn't been verified by the science of the day, he maintained that the flow of time as a physical energy and enhancing human perception and consciousness was successful. He believed his mirrors could focus this time energy and amplify mental and psychic abilities. Kozyrev noted when individuals sat inside the mirrors, they often reported extraordinary experiences, such as heightened intuition, telepathic connections, and even remote viewing of distant places or events. These mirrors appeared to focus and channel this energy around the occupant, creating a state of heightened awareness and mental clarity. Kozyrev believed this effect was due to the mirror's ability to concentrate the subtle interactions between time, consciousness, and the physical universe, unlocking latent potentials of the human mind. It all sounds pretty cool, right? Well, not so fast. Even though it is scarce, there were a few negative experiences. Allow me to read. One individual described the sensation as a black cloud generating fear, which seemed to emanate from the mirror setup. Another noted physical symptoms like dizziness and trembling hands, stating, "My hands were trembling and my head grew heavy." Now, they were few, but with every bad, there's always good. So let's take a look. In fact, Kozyrev's mirrors, based on the Fibonacci spiral, were working so well, the Russian government classified it as top secret. According to time anomalies in the Arctic North, published by the Subtle Energy Sciences, stated individuals were able to perceive past, present, and future events simultaneously. The article Rethinking Time, Kozyrev's Revolutionary Theory, published by the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution, suggests that entering the space of a Kozyrev mirror can enhance the human mind's ability to receive information from distant futures. So, if the mirrors were unsuccessful, why the interest by the KGB and the Russian government? And why was it classified top secret? Perhaps the answer lies with Nostradamus, one of the most famous seer of all times. Did they know that Nostradamus used a reflective egg that he used to sit in to contemplate future events, or gaze into his famous metallic bowl with water, with its reflective properties giving him answers to life's most interesting mysteries, questions, and future events. Well, not only was the KGB and the Russian government keeping a close eye on Kozyrev, so was the Central Intelligence Agency. Yep, the CIA. With all this interest from both the CIA and the KGB, likely using this application to psychic spy, does it surprise any of us that on the brink of Kozyrev lighting up his latest version, that he mysteriously and suddenly dies on February 27th, 1983? Things in life that make you say, When Nikolai Kozyrev passed away, the fate of his groundbreaking research on time and consciousness became shrouded in mystery. And while it's likely that his papers were archived by the observatory where he conducted much of his work, the collapse of the Soviet Union added to layers of uncertainty to the whereabouts. For years, the experiments where reflective mirrors and flow of time lay dormant, buried in obscurity. But as the USSR faded into history, a new generation of scientists, captivated by his bold ideas, began to rediscover and revive his work. Enter the era of psychic spies. Oh yes, the USSR's counterpart to Project Stargate in the United States was a broad research effort of parapsychology and psychic phenomena, often referred to under the umbrella term of psychotronics. The Soviets explored areas similar to those in Project Stargate, including remote viewing, telepathy, and psychokinesis, and the use of psychics for intelligence purposes. Although there is no direct ties between Kozyrev's mirrors and Project Stargate, there are several overlays that kind of lead one to believe they are slightly, if not all, connected, which led to the development of some of the best psychic spies we know to date. Ingo Swann, Joseph McMoneagle, Pat Price, Lynn Buchanan, and Paul Smith. Over time, with all the classifications, Project Stargate became known, and these talented psychic spies actually inspired Hollywood's movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, and it brought a comedic twist to these real-life experiments. Before there was a blockbuster movie of men staring at goats, in December 1990, in the Arctic village of Dixon, Russian scientists conducted experiments using Kozyrev mirrors. These experiments were led by Dr. Kaznichev, a prominent figure in Russian medical science. Participants reported experiencing anomalous psychophysical sensations, and some accounts mentioned the perception of a force field around the setup when ancient symbols were introduced. If that wasn't strange enough, well, things got even more weird in the town of Dixon.
December 24th, 1990, Tape 1. Having entered the room, we felt a kind of emotional pressure, but we kept talking as though we didn't care about it. We just couldn't keep standing around the mirrors. The fear was so strong, more like a wild terror that couldn't be explained. It seemed like a real thing we could touch. None of us had ever had such a feeling before.
This was not just physical being scared. This was abject terror, something that people described they could almost touch. Things were getting pretty bizarre in the lab, and people were not wanting to come in. Inside the lab, above the device, they began to see what looked like ball lightning appear. But it didn't stop there. Oh no. Outside the building, also, things began to appear in the sky. And it wasn't just witnessed by the scientists. It was also witnessed by the residents.
Coming to the lab at 8:30 a.m., I saw a red glimmering circle above the building. It was there for a minute and then gone.
At 5:10, I saw a UFO flying from the north. The object had the form of an ellipse radiating red-white light. There were beams of light coming off the object as if it was searching for something. The UFO remained in sight for about 4 minutes, then the light went off and it was gone.
Suddenly I felt a kind of hypnosis. The feeling didn't last long. I saw a white glimmering object which looked like Saturn against the dark sky.
These interesting anomalies went on for months. Were they UFOs? Were they something else? Regardless, even with all that going on, there were a few brave souls to enter the chamber. The scientists set up their test. They had 2 chambers, 1,400 miles apart. With each experiencer in each one was set with the task of sending thoughts to the universe, or into the Ethernet, if you will. And they were to concentrate on certain symbols. The person on the receiving end was just to sit there, relax, and figure out what was being sent. And to their astonishment, they were successful. And so they set up another test. On days where the electromagnetic field wasn't quite as active, the success rate was much lower, nearly 0 to 10%. But on days of active high magnetic fields, the results were astounding, and they were much, much higher. What does all this mean? Does it truly suggest that the magnetic field somehow has ties or influences human consciousness? It certainly does fit in with Kozyrev's theory that sunspots not only influence storms on Earth, but also influences human behavior. These experiments were working so well that they decided to test it on a worldwide scale. So, how it worked was that they got 2 operators to sit in 2 different cities, 1,400 miles apart, to concentrate on a certain image, and then imagine sitting it into the magnetic sphere. And they had 5,000 participants around the world to see if they could pick up the image. And what happened was even more surprising. Their success rate was 95%. How about that? With all this success rate, guess what happened? The CIA is now paying even closer attention. And as a side note, what is even more astounding is that the scientists began to learn after their worldwide study that young female children who were participated in the project in over 12 countries found that they were actually even more sensitive to what was being sent out to the cosmic internet. And what is so surprising is that the test was set up in a grid, if you will. Imagine a piece of paper with a bunch of numbers on it and a bunch of symbols. And what they tried was sending out just the number into the cosmic internet. And the children, these gifted children, and here's the thing, they were usually from shamanic or spiritual families. So they are not having that layer of resistance. They were just completely open. And what took place was that when the number was being projected out, the child was drawing what the symbol was. That's pretty astounding. Oh my goodness, I love this stuff. This is an example of what the child drew. The sender, or the one sitting inside the mirror, focused on the number. And as they focused with attention and intention on the number, it got projected out through their thoughts to the energetic field, or the cosmic internet, if you will. The recipient, or even in this case a child, just sat there and allowed the image to come into the mind. And as you see, they drew an image of what they saw that's correlated with the number that's being sent out. This is very much like remote viewing. Remember, the experiencers at first was having trouble even standing next to the mirrors, but over time, they were actually able to stay in the mirrors a lot longer, up to 7, 8, and 9 hours. And what happened next is mind-blowing.
Inside Kozyrev's space, at first I felt my body shaking to and fro. I felt pressure from all around my head grew heavy. Later, this feeling went, and I felt so light that it was like I was coming out of myself.
I felt my head grow heavy. It was also shaking a bit, and then it was gone. I saw people's faces flickering in my eyes. Then I saw black clouds. Then it was like I was falling through a black hole.
Everything became very visceral, very tangible. And as these witnesses inside the mirror, they began to notice they could see these symbols, and sometimes, and in some cases, ancient symbols, but they weren't reflections swirling around them. Oh no, they were like tangible, right here, swirling around. Oh my goodness. Oh, and did I mention that the symbols that were floating around in the room with the participants was glowing? And even more amazing is that these participants who knew nothing of each other in locations far away from each other were seeing the same symbols. And those symbols were a lot more than just glowing objects around the room and the space. They actually had a lot of commonality across the globe. And in fact, they had their roots in ancient languages, and more specifically, ancient Sumerian. Mind-blowing. And there was an added benefit that surprised everyone. The people who left the mirrors had a lingering effect, and it lingered for a long time afterwards. They reported having more mental clarity, higher IQ test, and in fact, they were more intuitive. Their psychic abilities were actually enhanced. In addition to the psychic abilities, there was a lot more creativity within the participants, and even those who suffered illnesses found their illnesses had actually disappeared. This all sounds pretty great, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to have all these superhuman powers? Except there's always the bad hoodle doer that will take a good thing and turn it into, a bad thing. And this is what caught the CIA's, attention. Now the question was it for good or for bad? But you know what else? It turns out when people would sit in these mirrors, not only were they getting information, they weren't alone. A common theme began to emerge among the experiencers, those who would go back and sit in those mirrors for longer periods of time. 70% of those experienced seeing UFOs. Others reported seeing actual alien structures, but the most interesting of all were 68% felt a presence of an alien species or a presence of something otherworldly.
I closed my eyes. I wanted to sleep, but all of a sudden I felt somebody touching my hand. My body shivered with fear.
Inside Kozyrev's space, at first I felt nothing at all. In a few minutes, I saw a human shape. It was white all over. In 30 seconds, it was gone.
Between the mirrors, I felt my head jerk, and something appeared. I was asked, "Who's that man with you?" I explained that he was a scientist. Then I asked them, "Who are you?" No answer came. I asked them, "Can you be seen?" And I saw human shapes.
I saw shining lights. I heard a voice asking me, "What do you want?" I answered, "I want to meet you." I only remember one word of the answer: lead. Saw a device with lights and an egg-shaped object. This ran in my mind. Come up. I answered, "I don't want to. I have fear of you." Then it was gone.
I saw a face. It wasn't that of a human. I got scared.
I was dizzy. I felt my head rolling around slowly. There were flashes of light. I asked who was there. The answer was, "I have no face. I am nothing and everything." Then I saw the eyes. The eyes were not very kind.
Those participants who experienced a presence in the room, they were scared. Now, whether or not the entity or the presence was actually scary, no one knows, because it was such a new thing, they weren't sure what to do with it. Some thought it was very fear-based, while others not so sure if it may have been helpful. But the other thing that's interesting that happened inside these mirrors are people who experienced time travel. And often they did time travel within their own lives. Some began to see themselves as small children, like watching a movie, watching them move through their life experience, while others got inside their younger selves and had communication with the people around them. Now, some people reported they were actually witnesses to historical events, while a woman reported seeing herself in a past life as an advisor to Genghis Khan. Dr. Kozyrev, just like Nostradamus, were men ahead of their times. And thankfully, there are scientists today that are taking science and consciousness and merging them together finally. And now maybe we can start getting some real answers. Before, Dr. Kozyrev was only being noticed by the KGB and the CIA because it had applications for psychic spying. But here's the thing, what it also has the applications for. If you, just like I tell everybody, is to ignite the superhuman in you, once you understand how powerful your own consciousness is, whether you go to an energy healer like myself, or if you go to the mirrors, the point is consciousness is very powerful and you possess it. All the answers that you or the world has ever had is actually lying within you. So that begs the question, are there past lives, or is there just information out there that we're tapping into? Boy, I have got so many questions, and like you, I'm going to be delving into them. So if you like this content, please hit the subscribe button and hit the thumbs up so other people can find us too. Now, if you're looking to have a past life regression or a past life reading, reach out to me at sallyknop.com. You can book a session. And if you just want to touch base on that energy healing, I do offer $25 for 25 minutes. So you can just dip your toe in to see if it works for you. Anyway, regardless of what happens, I hope you enjoyed this video and get out there and start igniting your own superhuman. Thanks for watching.